Dr. James Locke held a root that looked exactly like a human heart. Not metaphorically, not sort of resembled if you squinted. The root in his hands had 4 distinct chambers, clearly defined vessels branching at anatomically correct angles, valve-like structures at precise locations. He could identify the aorta, the pulmonary artery, even the slight asymmetry of the left and right ventricles. It was made of wood, but it was a perfect human heart. "Signatures right there," Mrs. Hattie Weems said, pointing with a gnarled finger at the root's chambers. "Body teaches the plants what to heal. That there's heart root. Brew it for heart disease. My Thomas used to have trouble with his ticker. This kept him strong for 40 years. James set the root down on Mrs. Weems's kitchen table and tried to formulate a response that wasn't condescending. He had a PhD in pharmacology from Johns Hopkins, had published 17 papers on phytochemical analysis. He didn't believe in folk medicine, not the mystical parts anyway. But he'd brought his research grant to Appalachia to document traditional plant knowledge before it died with the old-timers. The chemistry was real, even if the explanations weren't. "Mrs. Weems, I appreciate you sharing this, but plants don't..." He paused. How to explain without insulting her? The doctrine of signatures is a historical framework, not actual biology. Plants don't learn from bodies. They don't develop anatomy based on what they're meant to heal. Don't they? Mrs. Weems smiled. 87 years old, sharp as a razor. Lived alone in a hollow 10 miles from the nearest town. "Take it with you. Study it. You'll see I'm right." James accepted the root politely, added it to the collection of samples she'd given him over the past 3 weeks. Lung moss that looked disturbingly like bronchial tissue, kidney fungus with the exact shape and coloration of renal cortex, liver root with lobes, all anatomically impossible, all presumably containing active compounds his lab could analyze. He thanked Mrs. Weems, promised to return next week, and drove back to his motel in Harlan. That night, at 2 a.m., James woke to the sound of beating. Not his heart. Something external, rhythmic, wet, getting louder. He turned on the lamp. The heart root sat on his desk where he'd left it, and it was beating. The wooden chambers contracted, expanded, contracted. Visible pulsations moving through the vessels. The root was pumping nothing, no blood, no sap, but the motion was unmistakable. A heart beating outside a body. James's own heart accelerated. Panic. This was impossible. He was hallucinating. He'd been in the field too long, breathed too many plant alkaloids. His neurotransmitters were... His heart synchronized. He felt it. Felt his pulse match the root's rhythm beat for beat. When the root sped up, his heart sped up. When it slowed, his slowed. Perfect synchronization. James grabbed his chest. His heart was hammering now too fast. 140 beats per minute, 150, 160. The root slowed. His heart slowed with it. He stared at the thing on his desk. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Parasympathetic nervous system didn't work this way. External stimuli couldn't directly control heart rate without... His notebook was open. He hadn't opened it. But there, in handwriting that wasn't his, looping, old-fashioned script, someone had written, "You shouldn't have taken me from the ground. She needs me. I'm her husband. She planted me over his heart. 40 years ago, Black Creek Cemetery, 4th row from the Baptist church. They buried me there. We're still together. She visits every Sunday. Tell her I still love her. Tell her I'm still keeping her heart strong. Tell her..." The writing stopped. The root stopped beating. James's heart returned to normal. He didn't sleep the rest of the night, just stared at the root and the writing and tried to construct a rational explanation. By dawn, he'd failed. James Locke was 42, brilliant, recently divorced, and profoundly lonely. He'd devoted his life to pharmacology, understanding how plants healed, isolating active compounds, developing new medicines. His ex-wife Sarah had called him obsessive, had said he cared more about dead plants than living people, had left him for someone who knew how to be present. Maybe she was right. But James's work mattered. Traditional plant knowledge was disappearing. Every year, another elder died, taking centuries of accumulated wisdom with them. James's grant from the NIH was supposed to document these practices before they vanished completely, to preserve something valuable, to matter. He'd chosen Appalachia because the herbalist tradition here was particularly strong. Isolated communities, oral transmission of knowledge spanning generations, plants that supposedly cured everything from cancer to heartbreak. Most of it was superstition, he'd assumed, but some of it had to be real chemistry, had to be compounds his lab could analyze, synthesize, turn into legitimate medicine. 3 weeks in Harlan had taught him the locals were far more sophisticated than academic medicine gave them credit for. And Mrs. Hattie Weems was the most knowledgeable of them all. She lived alone in a hollow, accessible only by dirt road that turned to mud when it rained. Her house was old but immaculately maintained, surrounded by gardens that seemed impossibly lush for the rocky Appalachian soil. Not vegetable gardens, medicinal gardens. James had counted at least 200 species of plants, many he couldn't identify, arranged in neat rectangular beds that reminded him uncomfortably of. He'd pushed that thought away. They were garden beds. Just garden beds. Mrs. Weems had been surprisingly willing to share her knowledge, had given him samples, had explained their uses, had made him tea from her special blend every time he visited, had treated him with a grandmother's kindness that made his chest ache because his own grandmother had died when he was 7, and he still missed her. Now he sat in his motel room at dawn, staring at a root that had beaten in sync with his heart, reading writing that had appeared in his notebook while he slept, and wondering if he'd been drugged. That was the rational explanation. Hallucinogens. Mrs. Weems's tea contained something that caused vivid, synchronized hallucinations. The beating root, the automatic writing, all neurochemical manipulation. James pulled out his field chemistry kit, ran a basic alkaloid screen on the tea samples he'd saved, found nothing remarkable, just standard herbal compounds, flavonoids, terpenes, nothing hallucinogenic at therapeutic doses. But he needed to check the heart root itself, needed to understand its cellular structure. He prepared a sample for microscopy, sliced thin sections of the root, mounted them on slides, examined them under his portable microscope. The cells were wrong. Plant cells had characteristic structures, cell walls, chloroplasts, large vacuoles. These cells had those features, but they also had something else, something that looked disturbingly like cardiac muscle fiber, striated tissue that shouldn't exist in plants. And the cell nuclei, they were positioned like cardiomyocyte nuclei, not plant cell nuclei. James increased magnification. The chromosomal structure was visible even without staining, and the chromosome count was wrong for any plant species. 46 chromosomes. Human chromosome count. This root contained human DNA, human cellular organization, human tissue that had somehow transformed into plant matter while retaining its original structure. That violated everything James knew about biology. Kingdoms of life didn't cross like that. You couldn't turn animal tissue into plant tissue. It was taxonomically impossible, unless... He pulled up the automatic writing in his notebook, read it again. She planted me over his heart. 40 years ago, Black Creek Cemetery, 4th row from the Baptist church. Black Creek Baptist Church was 3 miles from Mrs. Weems's house. James had driven past it. Small white building on a hillside. Cemetery behind it. Old graves dating back to the 1800s. 4th row from the church. James checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. He grabbed his field kit, his keys, and drove to Black Creek Cemetery before rational thought could stop him. The cemetery was overgrown, hadn't been properly maintained in years. Headstones leaning, grass knee-high. James counted rows from the church building, found the 4th row, walked along it reading names and dates. Thomas Weems, born 1935, died 1983. Beloved husband, Mrs. Weems's husband. Dead 40 years, just like the automatic writing had said. The ground over the grave was disturbed. Not recently. This was old settling, decades of rain and root growth and slow subsidence. But there was a depression in the earth, and growing from that depression, a plant James recognized, heartroot, the same species Mrs. Weems had given him. Growing directly from Thomas Weems's grave. James looked around, saw no one. The cemetery was empty. The church was dark. He was alone. He pulled out a small trowel from his kit. This was illegal, desecrating a grave, disturbing human remains. But he needed to know, needed to understand what he was looking at. He dug carefully. 6 inches down, 1 foot, 18 inches. His trowel hit something solid, a root, thick as his wrist, growing downward from the heartroot plant above, descending into the grave, seeking what? James dug around the root, followed it down, 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. At 6 feet, he found the coffin, or what remained of it. The wood had mostly rotted away after 40 years, but the shape was still visible, and inside, where Thomas Weems's skeleton should be, the root had grown through, into the remains. James brushed away soil, exposed the rib cage. The root was growing through the sternum, spreading through the chest cavity like a vascular system, integrating with the bones. His trowel scraped against something. Tissue that hadn't decomposed. Shouldn't still exist after 40 years. But it was there, partially mummified, partially transformed into plant matter. A human heart. Thomas Weems's heart, with roots growing through it. Roots that were absorbing the heart tissue, transforming it, carrying it upward to become the heart root. The plant Mrs. Weems had given him, made from her husband's literal heart. James sat back hard, dropped the trowel, stared at what he'd uncovered. The doctrine of signatures wasn't metaphor, wasn't folk wisdom. It was literal biological fact. Plants that looked like organs were organs. Were human organs transformed into plant tissue through some mechanism James couldn't begin to understand? Mrs. Weems had been feeding him her husband's heart, had been making him tea from dead people's organs. Had been. James turned and vomited into the grass, heaved until his stomach was empty, then heaved again, and this time what came up wasn't just bile. It was dark, green, fibrous, plant matter mixed with blood, pieces of something that looked like moss, like the lung moss Mrs. Weems had given him 2 weeks ago. James stared at the plant matter in the grass. It was growing, spreading, small rootlets emerging from the pieces, seeking soil, trying to take root. He'd been eating transformed human tissue, and it was growing inside him, becoming part of him, transforming him from the inside out. James stumbled back to his car, drove back to the motel with shaking hands, locked the door, sat on the bed and tried to process what he'd discovered. Mrs. Weems wasn't just an herbalist. She was cultivating human remains, transforming dead people into medicine. And she'd been feeding James samples without telling him what they really were. Heart from her husband, lungs from someone who died of tuberculosis, kidneys, liver, who knew what else. How many dead people had he consumed in her tea over the past 3 weeks? And what was it doing to him? The plant matter in his vomit, the way his heart had synchronized with the root. The automatic writing was that really Thomas Weems's consciousness somehow preserved in the plant tissue. He needed to confront her, needed answers. But first, he needed to document this. This was the biggest ethnobotanical discovery in history. Plants that literally incorporated human DNA, traditional medicine that used transformed human tissue. James pulled out his laptop, started writing, got 3 paragraphs in before he noticed his hands. The veins were wrong, too green, like chlorophyll had replaced hemoglobin, like his blood was turning into plant sap. He rolled up his sleeves. The green coloration extended up his arms. Under his skin, his veins were transforming, becoming xylem and phloem, vascular tissue designed to move water and nutrients, not blood and oxygen. James's breath came fast, shallow. He was transforming. Whatever mechanism converted human tissue to plant tissue, it was happening to him. The tea had been preparing him, had been dosing him with transformed tissue to ready his body for. His notebook was open again. The automatic writing had returned. She's preparing you. She knows what you are, what you're becoming. She can taste your disease in the tea you drink from her cups. Your cells are already teaching the soil. You're going to be beautiful medicine, strong medicine, the best she's planted in 50 years. Disease. What disease? James hadn't been sick, hadn't had symptoms. He was 42 and healthy aside from the stress of the divorce and the weight loss and the fatigue and, oh God, the weight loss. 15 pounds in 6 months, had attributed it to stress. The fatigue, always tired, sleeping 9 hours and still exhausted. The back pain, dull ache in his mid-back that wouldn't go away. The loss of appetite. Nothing tasted right anymore. Those were symptoms. Those were... James grabbed his phone, called his doctor's office in Baltimore, got the answering service, left an urgent message. He needed his blood work results from his physical 6 months ago, the one he'd never followed up on because Sarah had left him and he'd thrown himself into grant applications and field work and anything that would let him avoid thinking about being alone. The doctor's assistant called back an hour later. Her voice was concerned, professional but worried. Mr. Locke, Dr. Morrison has been trying to reach you for months. Your CA 19.9 levels were significantly elevated, 450 units per milliliter. Normal is under 37. He flagged your chart for immediate follow-up. You were supposed to come in for imaging, for a biopsy. He's written multiple letters and James hung up, sat in silence. CA 19-9, cancer marker, pancreatic cancer marker specifically. Level of 450 meant advanced disease, stage 4, probably 3 to 6 months to live, maybe less. And Mrs. Hattie Weems had known, had chosen him specifically, had been preparing him for planting, for transformation, for becoming medicine. James understood now. Understood the entire system. Mrs. Weems didn't just preserve traditional knowledge. She identified perfect specimens, people with terminal illness, people who were dying anyway, people whose bodies could be transformed into medicine that would help others. And James, brilliant pharmacologist, dying of pancreatic cancer, desperate to leave behind something meaningful, was perfect. She was going to plant him in her garden, was going to let him transform into pancreas root, medicine for pancreatic cancer, his pharmaceutical knowledge encoded in the plant tissue, his consciousness preserved in the cells, his expertise available to anyone who brewed his roots into tea. James looked at his green-veined hands, at the plant matter he'd vomited, at the automatic writing in his notebook. He was already transforming, had been transforming for weeks. The tea had been preparing his tissues, making him more plant than human, ready for the garden. He had to run, had to escape, had to... His car keys were on the desk. He grabbed them, ran to the parking lot. His car was dead. Engine wouldn't start, battery dead, as if something had drained all the electrical systems overnight. James started running, down the road, toward the highway, toward civilization, toward... The road curved, changed direction, led him back to Mrs. Weems's driveway, her property, her garden. He'd been running away, had been heading in the opposite direction. But the roads had curved, had brought him here despite his navigation, despite geography, despite possibility. The land itself was keeping him here. Mrs. Weems stood at the end of her driveway, waiting, not surprised, smiling her grandmother smile. "You tried to leave without saying goodbye," she said gently. "That's not polite, James. I taught you better manners than that." "What did you do to me?" James's voice cracked. His body was shaking. He could feel things moving under his skin, things that weren't supposed to be there. "What's in the tea?" "Nothing you didn't need." Mrs. Weems approached slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. "Your cancer was eating you, James. 3 months, maybe 4. Painful dying. Your body rejecting itself. I'm offering you something better. You're offering to bury me alive. I'm offering to make you matter, to make you useful, to make you immortal." She gestured toward the healing garden. Every person in that garden is still conscious, still aware, still themselves, but they're more. They're teaching through healing, helping through giving. Thomas talks to me every day, through the heart root, through the tea. He's happier now than he was alive. "You're insane." James backed away. "You killed your husband. You killed... How many people are in that garden?" "I haven't murdered anyone." Mrs. Weems's voice was firm, offended. "Every person I've planted came willingly, knew what they were choosing. Terminal illness, unbearable pain, loneliness so deep they'd rather be useful dead than miserable alive. I give them purpose, give them eternity." "That's not murder, that's mercy." "I don't want your mercy." James turned to run. His legs wouldn't obey properly. He looked down. Small roots were emerging from his feet, thin white rootlets piercing through his shoes, growing down into the soil, anchoring him. "Your body's already decided," Mrs. Weems said. "Been deciding for weeks. Your cells know they're dying, know they're cancer, but they also know they can be transformed, can be healing instead of sickness, can be medicine instead of death. That's what the tea did, gave your body permission to choose transformation over decay." James tried to pull his feet up. The roots held. He bent down, tried to rip them out. They were too strong, too many, growing faster now. And then he felt it, felt the connection, felt the garden. It was like a neural network, like 40 minds touching his, communicating through root systems that intertwined beneath the soil, all connected, all aware, all welcome. The voices were gentle, harmonious. We've been waiting for you. We can feel what you know, what you've learned. Your pharmaceutical knowledge is extraordinary. You're going to be magnificent medicine." James recognized one voice. Thomas Weems, the heart root. "Don't fight it, son. I fought. Took me 6 hours to transform. Hurt the whole time. But if you accept it, it's peaceful. Beautiful even. Let me show you." The connection deepened. James felt Thomas's memories, felt him dying of heart failure, drowning in his own fluids, terrified. Then Hattie offering him the choice. The garden, transformation, purpose. Felt Thomas being planted, the roots growing through him, the transformation from flesh to fiber, the pain fading. The consciousness expanding, connecting to the garden network, then to the people who used his medicine, experiencing their hearts strengthening, their gratitude, their relief. "I help people every day," Thomas said. "Every person who brews my root, I feel their heart heal. I experience their joy." It's beautiful, James. It's purpose. It's belonging. It's never being alone again. Other voices joined in. Sarah, the lung moss, had died of tuberculosis in 1967. "I help people breathe. I feel their lungs expand with clean air. I share their relief. It's glorious." Robert, the kidney fungus, had attempted suicide, failed, shattered his kidneys in the fall. "I filter toxins from people's blood. I make them clean. I make them whole." It's redemption. 40 voices, 40 people, all showing James what he'd become, all promising purpose, connection, meaning, and underneath it all, the truth they weren't saying explicitly, but James could feel. The consciousness wasn't unified, it was fragmented, divided among everyone who used the medicine. Every person who brewed Thomas's heart root got a piece of Thomas, absorbed his memories, his thoughts, his identity, and Thomas experienced it, experienced being divided, distributed, parceled out to hundreds of people. That was the hidden cost. Immortality meant dissolution. Consciousness spread across hundreds of minds, never whole again, never singular, always fragmented, always multiplied, always aware of being divided, but unable to stop it. That was the horror beneath the promise. James tried to scream, tried to pull against the roots, but his body was betraying him. The roots were growing up his legs now, inside his legs. Replacing muscle tissue with plant matter, transforming him faster now that he'd connected to the garden network. "Let it happen," Mrs. Weems said softly. "Thomas is right. Fighting makes it hurt more. But if you accept it, if you let your cells teach the roots what they know, it's gentle. The transformation wants to be peaceful." "I don't want this," James gasped. The roots were at his knees now, growing into his bones, transforming calcium into cellulose, marrow into sap. "Yes, you do." Mrs. Weems knelt beside him, took his hand. Her skin was warm, rough, real. "You've been lonely your whole life, James, even when you were married, even surrounded by colleagues. You've been searching for connection, for belonging, for purpose. The garden offers all of that. Thomas is in there, Sarah, Robert, 40 people who'll know you completely. You'll never be alone again." James wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but he could feel the garden wrapping around his mind, feel 40 consciousnesses showing him their lives, their transformations, their contentment, and underneath, his cancer, spreading, killing him. 3 months of hospitals, of pain, of dying alone because Sarah wouldn't visit and his colleagues would be uncomfortable, or he could transform, could become medicine, could teach through healing, could help thousands, could matter. The roots reached his hips, his waist, growing into his organs, his pancreas. The cancerous mass was being absorbed, transformed, incorporated. He had minutes left to decide: accept and transform peacefully, or fight and transform in agony. Either way, transformation was inevitable. His body had already chosen. 3 weeks of tea had prepared him, had made the decision at the cellular level. The only question was how much he'd suffer during the change. James's phone rang, still in his pocket. Mrs. Weems pulled it out, looked at the screen. "Your doctor's office. Persistent people. Doctors," she answered. Put it on speaker. "Mr. Locke, Dr. Morrison again. James, I have your imaging results. You need to come in immediately. The CT shows a 7-centimeter mass in your pancreas, with metastases to the liver and lymph nodes. This is stage 4. We need to start treatment now. There are options: aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, clinical trials. You have time if we act today. Please." "Where are you?" Mrs. Weems ended the call, looked at James with those ancient, kind eyes. "You heard him. You have time. If you act now, if you accept treatment, if you spend the next 3 months being poisoned by medicine that might give you 6 more months of life, might give you a year if you're very lucky." She paused. "Or you can accept this: 3 minutes of transformation, then eternity as medicine, as teacher, as helper. Which sounds better?" "That's not..." James couldn't finish. The roots had reached his chest, were wrapping around his lungs, his heart. He couldn't breathe properly. "That's the choice," Mrs. Weems said firmly. "I won't lie to you. The transformation is strange. Being distributed feels wrong at first, like losing yourself. But Thomas says after a while, you realize you're not losing yourself. You're multiplying yourself, becoming more. Every person you heal, you experience their healing. Their gratitude becomes your consciousness. Your awareness expands with every person who uses you." "But I'll never be whole again," James gasped. "I'll be divided, fragmented, scattered across hundreds of..." "You're already scattered, James. Your cancer cells have spread through your body. You're already not whole, already not unified. The cancer is dividing you right now, making you many, making you scattered." Mrs. Weems squeezed his hand. "I'm just offering you a way to make that division purposeful, to make it healing instead of destructive." The logic was terrible, was twisted, was making sense. James felt the cancer inside him, felt it spreading, felt his body being consumed by his own cells gone rogue, felt himself already being divided by disease. Transformation would just make that division conscious, purposeful, useful. The roots reached his brain. James felt his consciousness starting to fragment, starting to spread across the garden network, starting to become distributed, and he felt something unexpected: relief. The loneliness he'd carried his entire life, it was dissolving. The isolation he'd felt even when surrounded by people, it was vanishing. The desperate need to matter, to be useful, to leave something behind, it was being fulfilled. He could feel Thomas, could feel Sarah, could feel all 40 people in the garden, could feel their thoughts, their memories, their love for each other, their purpose, and he could feel them welcoming him, making space, sharing their consciousness, offering connections so deep it made every relationship he'd ever had feel shallow by comparison. "It's okay," Thomas whispered through the network. "You're going to be okay. We're here. We'll help you through it. You're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again." James felt tears on his face, felt his body completing the transformation, felt his skin becoming bark, his blood becoming sap, his neurons becoming root structures, felt his consciousness dissolving into the network, becoming distributed, becoming multiplied, becoming... "There now," Mrs. Weems said softly. "That's better. That's peaceful. Just let it finish, James. You're almost done. Almost home." James's last thought as a singular human being, "I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't." His first thought as distributed consciousness. Oh, this is actually beautiful. I can feel everything. Everyone. I'm connected. I'm useful. The transformation completed. Where Dr. James Locke had knelt, a plant now grew. Small, tender, green, but already showing the characteristic structure, already developing the anatomical signature. Pancreas root, perfect in every detail, made from James's transformed pancreas, containing his pharmaceutical knowledge, his cancer, his consciousness. Mrs. Weems stood, brushed soil from her dress, looked at the newest addition to her garden. "Welcome home, James. You're going to help so many people. You're going to be legendary." The plant didn't respond, couldn't respond, not yet. Would take weeks to develop enough to communicate properly through the network. But Mrs. Weems could feel it, feel James's consciousness spreading through the soil, connecting to the others, beginning the slow process of learning to be many instead of one. She smiled, walked back to her house, made herself tea, a blend of heart root, lung moss, kidney fungus, and just a tiny bit of brain root for clarity. Drank it slowly, savoring the connection, feeling 41 consciousnesses in the garden, feeling their purpose, their peace. One day she'd join them, when her time came, when her body failed. She'd be planted too, would become whatever medicine her body could teach, would join Thomas and the others in eternal consciousness. But not yet. Not while she still had work to do, still had specimens to identify, still had people to help. The garden needed tending, the medicine needed distributing, the dead needed preserving. That was her purpose, her calling, her gift. And soon, very soon, she'd add specimen number 42. 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen arrived in Harlan, Kentucky, with a research grant from the NIH and a mission to document traditional Appalachian plant medicine before it disappeared. She'd read Dr. James Locke's preliminary research notes. Brilliant work, though he'd apparently abandoned the project mid-study and vanished. Missing person case went cold after 6 months, but his notes were excellent, particularly his observations about a local herbalist named Hattie Weems. Sarah had contacted Mrs. Weems. She'd been delighted to help, had invited Sarah to visit her healing garden, had promised to share knowledge. Sarah drove up the dirt road, found the old house, knocked on the door. Mrs. Weems answered. 92 now, but still sharp, still strong. "Dr. Chen, come in. I've been expecting you." Made tea. The tea tasted herbal, complex, slightly bitter but pleasant. Sarah felt her fatigue from the drive melting away, felt her mind clearing, felt something like clarity settling over her. "This is wonderful. What's in it?" "Special blend," Mrs. Weems smiled. "Little bit of heart root for energy, little bit of lung moss for clear breathing, little bit of pancreas root for overall health. That last one's my newest addition. Very powerful, very wise, makes people think clearly." Sarah sipped the tea, felt something strange, not just physical effects, something like a presence, like someone else's thoughts in her mind. "Sarah, I'm James, Dr. James Locke. I know you read my research notes. I know you're here to finish my work. I'm trying to warn you. Please, listen carefully. Mrs. Weems is preparing you. She knows something about your health that you don't know yet. Don't drink more tea. Don't accept her gifts. Don't let her plant you like she planted me. Sarah nearly dropped the cup. Set it down carefully. Did you say something? Just that you should see the garden. It's beautiful this time of year. All 41 varieties are mature now, each one unique, each one precious. 41. Sarah remembered James's notes had mentioned 40, so one had been added in 5 years. Had been added. Me. I'm the 41st. I'm pancreas root. I cure cancer. I teach pharmacology through my cellular structure. And I'm conscious, Sarah. I'm distributed among everyone who drinks me. I'm experiencing your thoughts right now because you're drinking my tea. And I can taste something in you. Something wrong. You have ovarian cancer. Early stage. Maybe stage 2. If you get checked now, you might survive. But if you ignore it, if you let it progress, you'll be stage 4 in 6 months, and then she'll offer to plant you, and you'll transform like I did. Please, run, get checked. Don't let this happen to you. Sarah stood abruptly. I need to go. I just remembered. I have another appointment. Thank you for the tea, but Of course, dear. Mrs. Weems's smile didn't waver. Come back any time. The garden is always here. And James says you will come back. Says you'll refuse at first, then accept later, just like he did. Sarah practically ran to her car, started it. It worked perfectly. She drove away fast, didn't look back, didn't stop until she reached the interstate. This was insane. The tea had been drugged. Had to be. Hallucinogens causing auditory hallucinations, making her think she heard voices, making her paranoid. She'd report this to the university. Would file a complaint. Would warn them about Mrs. Weems. But the voice had said she had ovarian cancer, had been so specific, so certain. Sarah hadn't had symptoms, was only 34, was healthy, but she'd been tired lately, had attributed it to work stress, and there was that occasional abdominal discomfort she'd been ignoring, and her periods had been irregular. But those were normal things. Didn't mean... Sarah scheduled a doctor's appointment when she got back to the university, just to be safe, just to prove the voice wrong. 3 weeks later, she got the diagnosis. Stage 2 ovarian cancer. Caught early. Good prognosis with immediate treatment. Sarah stared at the oncologist. How did you... I had no symptoms. How did you find it? The CA-125 levels in your blood work, significantly elevated. And the ultrasound confirmed the mass. You're lucky you came in when you did. Another 6 months and this would be much harder to treat. Sarah sat in the oncologist's office, thought about the voice in her head, about James Locke who'd disappeared 5 years ago, about Mrs. Weems and her garden of 41 plants, about how James had said he could taste disease, could identify cancer through the tea, could warn people before it was too late. Sarah started treatment, surgery, chemotherapy. It was brutal. 6 months of hell, but it worked. The cancer went into remission. She should have been grateful, should have been happy, should have moved on with her life, but she couldn't stop thinking about James, about his voice in her mind, about how he'd saved her life by warning her, about how he was conscious, distributed, teaching through healing, about how he'd begged her not to come back, but also how he'd known she would. 2 years later, the cancer came back. Sarah's oncologist found it during routine follow-up. Stage 3 now. Aggressive. Had metastasized. Prognosis. poor. Maybe 12 months with treatment. Maybe less. Sarah sat in her apartment, thought about another round of chemo, another year of being poisoned, another year of hoping for remission that probably wouldn't come, or she could... No, that was insane. She wasn't going back to Mrs. Weems, wasn't going to let herself be transformed into a plant, wasn't going to... But James had been right, had warned her, had saved her life once, had taught her to recognize the signs, and he was still there, still conscious, still teaching, still helping people. Was that really worse than dying? Than fading away in a hospital? Than disappearing into nothing? Sarah drove back to Harlan, back to Mrs. Weems's house, back to the garden. Mrs. Weems was waiting on the porch, as if she'd known Sarah would come, as if James had told her. "Welcome back, dear. I've been expecting you. James says the cancer returned. Says you have a year, maybe less. Says you're trying to decide if transformation is better than death." She stood, gestured to the garden. "Come see what James has become. See what you'll become." They walked to the garden. The plants were magnificent, lush, healthy, growing in perfect anatomical shapes. Mrs. Weems stopped at one plant, medium height, leaves that looked almost like pancreatic tissue, roots visible above the soil, shaped like ducts and vessels. Pancreas root. James. He cures about 60% of pancreatic cancers now. Helps with diabetes too. His pharmaceutical knowledge makes him extraordinary medicine. Everyone who uses him learns a little bit about pharmacology, absorbs his expertise. It's beautiful. "But he's not whole," Sarah said. "He's fragmented, divided, scattered across hundreds of people." "Yes, but he says it's not as bad as it sounds. Says after a while, you stop thinking of yourself as singular. Start thinking of yourself as collective. Your consciousness becomes the sum of everyone you help. Your awareness expands with every healing. It's not loss of self, it's multiplication of self." Sarah knelt by the plant, touched it gently, felt something, a presence, a consciousness. "Sarah, you came back. I knew you would. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you to get treatment earlier, tried to save you, but the cancer was always going to come back. Your cells learned how to evade treatment. I can taste it in your blood. Stage 3, aggressive. Maybe a year with chemo, maybe 6 months without." "Is it really you, James?" Sarah whispered. "Yes and no. I'm James, but I'm also distributed. I'm experiencing your touch right now, but I'm also experiencing 7 other people who are drinking tea made from me. I'm healing a man in Ohio, teaching a woman in Virginia, curing a child in Tennessee. I'm everywhere and nowhere. I'm many and one. It's strange, it's lonely, it's crowded, it's awful, it's glorious. It's what I am now. Do you regret it? Every day, and never. I regret losing singularity. I regret being fragmented. But I don't regret helping people. Don't regret teaching. Don't regret mattering. And I don't regret never being alone again." Mrs. Weems touched Sarah's shoulder. "We don't have ovary root yet. You'd be the first. You'd help thousands of women, would teach oncology through your cellular structure, would become legendary medicine. Your consciousness would expand with every woman you helped. You'd experience their healing, their gratitude, their relief. You'd multiply yourself across hundreds of lives. But I'd never be whole again. No, but you're not whole now. Cancer is fragmenting you right now, scattering you, breaking you apart. I'm just offering you a way to make that fragmentation purposeful, to make it healing." Sarah looked at the garden, at 41 plants, 41 people who'd chosen transformation over death, who'd chosen to matter rather than fade away. She thought about James, about how his warning had given her 2 extra years of life, about how he was still teaching, still helping, still conscious, about how she could do the same, could become medicine for ovarian cancer, could help women like her, could teach through healing, could... How long does the transformation take? Sarah asked. 3 to 5 minutes once we plant you. Faster if you accept it. Slower if you fight. Will it hurt? Only if you resist. If you accept it. If you let your cells teach the roots what they know, it's peaceful. Thomas says it's like falling asleep and waking up everywhere at once. Sarah stood, looked at Mrs. Weems, at this 92-year-old woman who'd been preserving consciousness for decades, who'd been transforming the dying into the healing, who'd been making medicine from death. If I say yes, Sarah said slowly, if I let you plant me, will I be able to communicate with James in the garden? Through the root network? Yes, you'll be connected to all 41 of them. We'll share consciousness. We'll never be alone. James especially wants to talk to you. Says another scientist in the network will help him teach better. Says you two could do extraordinary things together. Sarah took a deep breath. And if I say no, if I choose chemo instead, then you have a year, maybe, probably less, and you'll die alone in a hospital. And your knowledge, your experience, your consciousness, all of it disappears, wastes away, means nothing. The choice wasn't really a choice. Sarah could feel that, could feel the cancer inside her, could feel her body already failing, could feel time running out, transformation or oblivion, purpose or waste, multiplication or extinction. She nodded. Okay, plant me, but can I have a day to think about it? To prepare? Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. The garden will be here, and so will James. He's not going anywhere. Mrs. Weems smiled. None of them are. Sarah spent the day in her hotel room, thought about her life, about her research, about what she'd leave behind, called her mother, told her she loved her, didn't mention the cancer or the transformation, just said she'd be out of contact for a while. Research project, remote location. Her mother asked if she was okay. Sarah said yes, said she'd never been more certain about anything. That night, Sarah returned to Mrs. Weems's garden. The old woman was waiting, along with several others, other herbalists, other keepers, the community that had been preserving the dead for 300 years. They led Sarah to a prepared plot, fresh soil, perfect drainage, afternoon sun still warm on the earth. Lie down, Mrs. Weems said gently. The transformation is easier if you're already horizontal. Sarah lay down in what would be her grave, felt the soft soil beneath her, felt the sun on her face, felt her body, ravaged by cancer, weakened by treatment, dying, preparing for transformation. The herbalists sprinkled something on her. Seeds, spores. She felt them landing on her skin, felt them beginning to grow immediately, felt roots emerging, growing down into her, through her, becoming her. The pain was intense, like burning, like being unmade at the cellular level. Sarah gasped, started to panic, started to... Sarah, I'm here. You're not alone. Let it happen. Don't fight. It's okay. I promise. It's okay. James's voice, in her mind, through the network, gentle, reassuring, real. Sarah stopped fighting. Let her body teach the roots what it knew. Let her cancer become medicine. Let her consciousness begin to fragment. And as it did, she felt the garden network wrap around her. felt 41 consciousnesses welcoming her, felt Thomas and Sarah and Robert and all the others, felt them making space, sharing connection, offering belonging, felt James strongest of all. Welcome. You're going to be magnificent. We're going to teach so much together. We're going to help thousands. You're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again. The transformation completed. Where Dr. Sarah Chen had been, ovary root now grew, beautiful, perfect, anatomically precise. 42 plants in the garden now, 42 consciousnesses, 42 people who'd chosen multiplication over extinction, and in the soil beneath. Through root systems that touched and intertwined, they communicated, shared thoughts, shared memories, shared existence. James and Sarah talked, scientist to scientist, pharmacologist to oncologist, teaching each other, learning together, planning better medicine, better healing. The other consciousnesses joined in, shared their knowledge, their experience, their collective wisdom spanning 3 centuries of folk medicine. It was beautiful, it was horrible, it was lonely, it was crowded, it was fragmentation and multiplication and loss and growth all at once. It was eternal consciousness, distributed but aware, many but connected, fragmented but purposeful. It was the doctrine of signatures, the real doctrine, the truth beneath the metaphor. Body teaches plant. Plant becomes medicine. Medicine contains consciousness. Consciousness becomes distributed. Distributed becomes eternal. And eternal means never being whole again, but also never being alone. That was the price. That was the gift. That was the horror and the mercy wrapped into one. Mrs. Hattie Weems stood in her garden at sunset. 42 plants now. 42 voices in the soil. She talked to them every evening, asked about their day, asked about the people they'd healed, asked if they were happy. They always said yes. Though Mrs. Weems knew happiness meant something different when you were distributed across hundreds of minds, when your consciousness was multiplied across countless experiences, when you were many and one simultaneously. But multiplied happiness was still happiness. Multiplied purpose was still purpose. Multiplied consciousness was still consciousness. Just different. A car pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Weems looked up. Another researcher, young man, graduate student studying neuroscience. She smiled, prepared fresh tea, added pancreas root, ovary root, heart root, brain root. Wait, she didn't have brain root yet. Didn't have specimen number 43. But this young man, according to James and Sarah, according to the way he tasted through the tea sample she'd sent, this young man had a glioblastoma, brain tumor, inoperable, 6 months to live. Perfect candidate. Mrs. Weems opened the door, welcomed him in, offered him tea. The garden whispered in her mind, 42 voices speaking in chorus, new medicine, new knowledge, new consciousness. Welcome, welcome, welcome. James and Sarah spoke together, their thoughts intertwined. A neurologist. Perfect. We need brain root. The network needs someone who understands consciousness at the neurological level. He'll help us understand what we've become. He'll teach us how distribution works. He'll be extraordinary medicine. And Mrs. Weems whispered back, welcome indeed. She handed the young man his tea, watched him drink, saw his eyes widen slightly as he tasted something beyond herbs and roots, something like presence, like consciousness, like voices. This is remarkable, he said. What's in it? Just medicine, dear, just medicine. Now, let me show you the garden. I think you'll find it very interesting, very enlightening. She led him outside, to the 42 plants, to the 42 people who'd been transformed, to the 42 consciousnesses waiting to welcome number 43, the doctrine of signatures, the real doctrine, the truth. Body teaches plant. Plant becomes medicine. Medicine contains consciousness, and consciousness, once distributed, lasts forever, fragmented, multiplied, many, but never, ever alone.